auto alert when customer cashes multiple checks from the same company within 7 days. Not a lot of people use this particular feature. A lot of our corporates might, but for individuals, usually, a lot of people get a paycheck from the company they work for once a week. So if you've got this set up, actually, I take that. That's this one. I'm sorry. This first one is if somebody comes in and cashes multiple checks from the same company. Somebody comes in with a check from like McDonald's. You may not want to set this option because he's going to come in once a week, unless he's paid every 2 weeks or whatever, with the same type of check from the same company. So he's obviously, if he works for McDonald's, he's always going to get a McDonald's paycheck, and it's probably going to be pretty frequently. So not a lot of people use this one. That's going to be the same. When one customer cashes multiple checks from the same company within a given number of days. Now this one down here is going to alert you when cashing a check from the same company. This is when anybody cashes a check from the same company. Let's say you only know that one person is supposed to cash a check from ABC Finance. Okay. Again, this option is only used in very specific cases, but you got only one customer is supposed to cash a check from ABC Finance and he comes in once a week. Well, if the second person comes in and tries to cash from ABC Finance within the week, there's a problem. So you can set that. Again, it's usually used for a very specific case, so we're not going to go too much into that one. Warrant on expired IDs. Certain states, they're part of their compliancy is that you have to make sure you have a valid ID on file. So this by default is checked that it'll warn you that, hey, this customer's come in and his ID is expired, so we need to get a new ID from him. Getting fingerprint for each check. This is again, for a compliancy issue, some states require that if you cash a check, say over $1,000, they need you to get a new fingerprint on file for that customer. Specifically, usually that goes in relation with superimposing. So what you would do is you would say, okay, I want for everything over $1,000, and then I want to superimpose this fingerprint on the front of the check. Now what that'll do is whenever that customer comes in and tries to cash a check for $1,000 or more, it's going to bring up the fingerprint window. They're going to put their finger on there, and it's going to superimpose a copy of that fingerprint onto that check if you ever have to reprint that check for purposes of compliancy. It's the same thing as if you had a regular ink fingerprint system sitting there. If a customer comes in with $1,000, you say, stick your finger in the ink and lay it down here on the check. Some states require that, others don't. The rest of these are just preferences that we're not going to really go over. They're pretty self-explanatory. These down here, always choose a maker when cashing an individual check. If most of your customers always cash a check from the same place, say, all of your customers all work for, one or two different companies, they're always going to be cashing from those one or two companies. Well, it's going to know TeraCash is going to know what company it is once you've got them into the database, because it's going to be based on the routing number and account number. So it's going to say, well, the routing number and account number for this particular customer, well, we already know that the maker is going to be McDonald's. So we may not need to actually be shown a list of McDonald's, because there's only going to be one item in the list. It's going to be McDonald's. You're going to double click on it. Now, if you've got a scenario where you've got customers that come in that frequently bring in checks from other companies, like one day they might bring in a check from McDonald's, another day they might bring in a check from Burger King, another day they might bring it, then you may want to select this option. That way you always know, you can always look at the check and verify which company you're pulling in from the list, so you can cash the check for the right person. Very similar to always choosing an officer when cashing a corporate check. If there's only one if all of your corporate checks only have one officer, then you can turn that off and never select it. But if you have companies that have multiple officers, corporations that have multiple officers, then you may want to see that so you can select the right officer for, again, sake of compliancy. And then this is an option you can turn off. Whenever you scan the check, it's going to show you an image of what the front and the back of the check looks like. If you don't want to see that and you just want to take the system's word for it that the check looks right, then you can turn that off and you can skip a step. Again, that's a preference, that's up to you. And then we've got a second sub tab here. Now if you're using the latest version, which is this one, then you'll see this sub tab here, and what this gives you the opportunity of doing is the first part, at least, lets you do maker research is basically what it is. You drop down the list of your state. In our case we're in Florida, and it's just going to pre-populate a couple of buttons here, a couple of different options, so you don't have to go do the research and find out yourself. And what this does is basically when you're on the new customer wizard or the managed customer, you'll see the maker's name will be underlined in blue, and whatever name you type in there, you can click on that blue link and it'll pop up a website. It'll go to whatever URL is in here, it'll fill in whatever search field they have, and it'll submit whatever button it needs to submit, so that you can actually do a lookup to see, on your corporate, your state's corporate website, are they a legitimate corporation or not? Are they still active? Does the address match? Things like that. Now this here is the ability to print a message on the bottom of your receipt. So if you want to say thank you so much for shopping at such and such, things like that. And then this here is to add a little company logo to the top of your receipt. And again, this is tells you here that the company logo should be 250 pixels by 100 pixels. So, and that's all that there is to these. I get POS settings. That's again for the POS side of it. There's not much for that. We're not going to cover that because we're not demonstrating the POS in this particular configuration. So that's all that you got to do to set up. Now the important things is what we started with, which is I have a check scanner, and select your check scanner. Use biometrics provider if you have one. Set that to digital persona and for what method you want, identification or verification. And then under the devices tab, you configure the rest of your devices depending on what you have to configure. After you've done with all of this, then you just hit OK. And then just to make sure, because not sure what all you might have changed, but in our case it's always better just to make sure that we go ahead and close TeraCash, and then we restart it. Now this time we can just restart it by double clicking on it because we don't need to change anything else. And then that will reset everything. It'll tell us, okay, we're using this scanner, we're using this camera, we're using this for biometrics. And then you can just test each of those things to make sure they work as they're expected to, and make sure you set up everything correctly. So we'll go ahead and start TeraCash here with all the new settings. Okay. And now to test the check scanner, oh yes, this just is the first time you run TeraCash, it brings you up, or actually anytime we have a notification, we issue a notification system-wide, you'll be prompted with this particular window here showing you all the available notifications. So we can close that. And now to test your check scanner, if you're using the STX, and it supports the automatic feed, you can just put your check in the machine, it'll scan it through, And then if you have that option selected that we discussed about showing the front and back of the image, then you'll see this. And then you know your check scanner is working. Now in our case, of course, it's an empty database, so it's not going to find anybody who matches that. So we're going to say no to that. Now if you want to test your fingerprint and you've got it in identification mode, if you just put your finger on the reader, it'll look for you. Of course it's not going to find you because we've got an empty database, but that'll test that the reader is actually working. And then you'll be able to test your camera once you add a new customer. And that should just about do it for our configuration initially of TeraCash. The only other thing I want to discuss with you real quickly is, again, back under Tools and Setup, you might want to look at getting like a USB flash drive or something along those lines so you can actually back up your data on a regular basis. And if you set up if you get one of the little flash drives, you just pop it into your USB, creates a little drive letter. You can create a directory on there called TeraCash Backups, and that way if something ever happens to your computer, or lightning strikes it, or the hard drive crashes, or something along those lines, you can have a later backup of it. To do that, once you've got the USB drive in there, you just select where you want it to back up by clicking on this. You'll have something like maybe an E drive or an F or a G, whatever it's assigned, whatever drive letter it assigned your USB drive. And then you would select that, and you would select whatever subdirectory you created in there, like maybe you made a folder called TeraCash Backup. If you didn't make a folder on there, you can just click on your drive letter and make one now, and then select it, and then OK that, and it'll change this. And then you can set up your backup reminder for however many days you want to be reminded to back up. So say you want it every week. If you haven't, every week if you haven't backed up, it's going to remind you to back up. You might want to do that every day. You may never want to be reminded, so you would put 0. So that's something you want to look at too, because if you don't back up your data and the computer crashes, calling us for help in that case is going to be fruitless, because there's nothing we can do if your hard drive crashes or your computer gets struck by lightning and you didn't bother to back anything up. Then we can't help you recover any of that data. None of the data is stored on our systems. This is all local to you, so we're not going to be able to restore your data for you unless you have a good working backup. Well, that concludes our part 2 of this series. Hope it's been beneficial to you. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, or suggestions about this video or any of our other videos, or if you have some additional questions, something you may not have understood or need further clarification on, we invite you to send us an email at support@teracash.com. We'll go ahead and splash that up on the screen for you so you can jot it down. Any kind of questions or suggestions or feedback, anything like that, go ahead and send us an email. We'll be glad to respond. Thank you very much, and hope you have a great time using TeraCash.